that now. And see, you can, if you open up participants, Yvette, you'll see that admit, and you can just admit them there. Hey, Trina. Hi, everyone. Yeah, lovely to hear and see all of you. If you want to just pop in the chat where your name, where you're from.
Philipa, I haven't got participants.
Okay, click on the participants.
Oh, yes, I have now. Okay.
Excellent. That would help. Yvette's going to help me manage as part of the team. Chris, my husband, may join us a bit later. He wanted to jump in the room. I said, that'll be too distracting. I can't quite have that. So, oh, and there's a button you can hit admit all. So, and we've got 1 more minute. I love that here. And we're recording. So fantastic. Barbara, thank you, from Boca Raton, Florida. Ooh, almost bedtime there.
Wow.
Give us a...
Philipa,
yes.
Sorry, you've got Tally James as co-host.
Oh gosh. Okay. Have I?
Yes.
Okay.
There's 1 minute before I start. I'm going to grab a glass
I
of water.
was wondering why I could admit people. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm going to withdraw.
I'm happy to help if you need.
I appreciate that. Okay, that's what it is. Thank you. Because that is such the problem of divided attention. Yvette Allen, make co-host. I see. There we go. Yes, I should read that. It actually says who to make co-host. Sorry about that. Thank you, Telly. I really appreciate that. People are so nice. Oh, so yeah, I know we've got people from the States. We've got people from New Zealand. I just saw Faye from New Zealand coming on there. We've got people from Australia, anywhere else in the world. I'll just close that off. Robin's from the Gold Coast, hypnotherapist. Joss from Wodonga. Thank you, Joss. Barbara, Lawrence from Melbourne. Yes. Some of these names I know. Hi, Catherine. Yes. North Bondi.
I didn't realize this was going to be a worldwide talk.
You are worldwide, world renowned, Rory. So very popular. And so as it's just gone 10:01, I'll just let a few more people come in because to give people a few more leeways before I introduce you. And that's
I'm flexible.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. That's what I hear from reading your books too. Flexibility is one of the keys as a therapist, isn't it? How are you going there, Yvette, with admitting? I'm doing a bit.
I did admit all. No,
Excellent.
No, I haven't got anybody up waiting at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't think.
So I will start, and if you just keep admitting people as they come along. And look who we've got. Catherine, Barb from beautiful Sunshine Coast, Queensland, psychologist, hypnotherapist, and it's a glorious day there. Oh, I can see, but that looks like a virtual background to me. Looks like my Coogee Beach. Beautiful, Barb. And Central Close, Tully, thank you. Wow. And oh my God, Joanne from England. What time is it there, Joanne? Hi, Lynette.
It's 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God.
Wow, I am impressed that you would want to stay up till 1 a.m.
I've been to bed and
Good
set
on
an
you,
alarm.
as they say in Australia.
Wow. This is international, global. Wow. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And Trina's from the Gold Coast. Hi, Marcel from Melbourne, Victoria. Because we've got Victoria's a bit in lockdown. I actually had a COVID test yesterday. I'm negative, I'm glad to say. So, yeah. Oh, welcome to people. Yeah. So where are you? Roy, you're in Seattle, aren't you?
My wife and I live 40 miles southeast of Seattle in a town called Bonnie Lake.
Bonnie Lake. Oh, what a beautiful name. That sounds very Scottish, actually.
Years ago, it used to be out in the boonies, and people used to call it Booney Lake, but now it's the southeastern part of the Seattle-Tacoma metropolitan area.
Oh, wow. The spread of civilization goes forth, isn't it? And we're so lucky. Oops, I think that's my cat at the door. We're so lucky to have you this weekend because unfortunately a training was put off, and that's why you're able to come, wasn't it, this weekend? Because you're so busy, Roy.
Well, you asked me in advance, far enough in advance that I could mark my calendar.
Yeah.
And it helps me to know in advance because I do a lot of full-time caregiving. My wife's been totally disabled.
Excuse me, I'll just get everyone to mute themselves.
Philippa, you muted yourself.
I did. Thanks, Gina. This is what happens. Okay. So just for now, if there's background noise, and Yvette, can I get you on that? And yes, fantastic. Thank you. And okay, it's 1 more minute. I'll start at 10:05 and we've got 28 people on the call so far. So wow, that's incredible. Just having 28 people. Oh, we've got Kia ora from Faye in Auckland. Kia ora, Faye. So wow, and Marcel's from Belgrade South. Gina, you're from Canberra. The Canberra contingent, I know. And there's someone calling in from their mobile as well. If you just want to type in the chat, Ellen Barsky from San Francisco. Yeah, California State. Thank you. I love that. It's amazing. It's a great time. Love talking to our friends in the US, all around the world. It's been amazing. Thanks, Ellen. Lovely. Beautiful San Francisco. It is beautiful. Yeah. And is that a real background there? Yes, it is, isn't it, Ellen? I can see sunlight dappling across.
Yes, it's part of my backyard.
We want to all join you there, don't we?
Come on over. Weather's fine. And Roy, I've been Roy for years. So you're all welcome.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Of course, we'd have to be about 1.5 meters socially, well, physically distancing rather than socially. That's a nicer kind of way to put it, really. Hopefully things will clear soon and we can move forward. So it's 10:06 actually, and I'm going to dive into the official presentation and welcome our esteemed guest. Very, very privileged and grateful and honored to have parts and hypnosis master Roy Hunter here, generously sharing his knowledge and time. Thank you, Roy. Roy is a highly respected author and trainer in the hypnotherapy profession and parts therapy. He's published many books, including Mastering the Power of Self-Hypnosis, The Art of Spiritual Hypnosis, Taming Chronic Pain, which he co-authored with clinical psychologist Bruce Eimer, The Art of Hypnosis, and The Art of Hypnotherapy. There's a couple of them here. So I would highly recommend them. In fact, I was looking at one of the reviews. Someone said they were like Bibles to them. They really are very easily read. And the parts therapy text, Hypnosis for Inner Conflict Resolution, which I quickly flashed up there as the purple one, is amazing. Has received raving reviews. And when I went on Roy's website, which is in the PDF that's down in your chat function there, you're free to download, and I will include in the newsletter. The list of Roy's achievements were so long. They're like the list of my arm. so many. And he has received recognition of lifetime achievement from 3 different organizations. He is a living legend. He's a fellow of the Association of Professional Hypnosis and Psychotherapy, a life diplomat of the International Medical and Dental Hypnotherapy Association, and his experience as a hypnosis trainer is presenting master classes around the world and in London, the US, and now online. And he is in high demand across the 5 continents and going global. And his website is www.royhunter. So thank you and welcome to Roy and this. So thank you. Okay. I'm just going to go back to Zoom.
Hello,
and-
everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night, wherever you are in the world. It's an honor and a privilege to be here and to share some information with all of you. I guess the best way to start is to ask if all of you are familiar with the concept of parts therapy. And I'm assuming most of you are familiar with either ego state therapy, parts therapy, resource therapy, or one of the variations. But in case anyone isn't, I'd like to start out my talk by saying it's based on the concept. All the variations of parts therapy are based on the concept that our personality is composed of various parts, aspects of the subconscious. For example, I have an inner child, an inner adolescent, an inner adult, an inner parent. I have an inner judge, which I'll talk about later. That judge was what Emerson would call a vated part for many years of my life. But that vated part did a 180 turnaround on a session that I had after I got trained in hypnotherapy and became a very valuable part that motivates me to make sure my books are better than good before I send them to the publisher.
Better than good. Fantastic. Yes, and we've got to mention that you are friends with Gordon and Anna Emerson, and that's how I actually came to know Roy. Thank you, Roy.
You're
Yeah, I can't
welcome.
wait
And
to
I'm
hear
very
about the judge.
grateful. I'm very grateful that Gordon Emerson was willing to write the foreword for the Art of Regression Therapy that Bruce Eimer and I co-authored. Was published in 2012 by Crown House Publishing.
Yeah. Okay, was that the one? Oh, I might have made a mistake in that. Sorry.
Oh, well, we also co-authored a book on
Oh,
taming chronic pain.
so that's
Just
that's where I
recently
got it.
released this summer.
Yes. Okay,
Yes.
I thought, yeah. So there's two. Beautiful. Another book by Roy. That's fantastic.
Charles Tibbetts was my original trainer and mentor, and little did I realize when I studied under him that he would become a 20th century legend in the hypnotherapy profession. He's best known for being a pioneer of parts therapy, and while Watkins and Watkins were pioneering ego state therapy, Charles Tibbetts was pioneering parts therapy. Originally, he called it ego parts therapy. He eventually dropped the ego and just called it parts therapy by the time I studied under him in 1983. He based his work on the work of Paul Verdern and also gave Verdern credit. One of the things I respected about Charlie was he always gave credit where credit was due. And I find it interesting that in the mental health field, while Watkins and Watkins were pioneering ego state therapy, Charles Tibbetts simultaneously was pioneering parts therapy for the hypnotherapy profession. It almost seems more than coincidental when you consider a couple decades during the 20th century to be just a fraction of the amount of time in recorded history.
Amazing.
So to me, that seems like it was meant to be. The idea was out there, the time had come, and the Watkins and Watkins and Charles Tibbetts weren't the only ones to tune in on the concept. So the title of the PDF is Parts Therapy and Variations of Parts Therapy. And it's my professional opinion that anyone who practices any of the variations owes it to himself or herself and their clients to know that there are other games in town. Parts therapy is not the only game in town, just like resource therapy isn't the only game in town. So on the first page of the handout, I have ego state therapy and resource therapy.
So
And
this
as I
is
mentioned, John and Helen Watkins pioneered it, and they asked Gordon Emerson to continue their work, as I'm sure all of you in the resource therapy arena realize. And then Gordon evolved it into resource therapy. So ego state therapy, I thought, was the closest of all the variations to parts therapy, even though it didn't have a particular set protocol. And I have a protocol for parts therapy. I won't discuss the protocol. However, those of you who want to know what the parts therapy protocol is will find on the last page an outline of my 3-phase process, which includes the 11-step process, which is the actual parts therapy process itself. But I like to summarize the variations. Anytime I teach a 2-day parts therapy workshop, I start out the day by summarizing the variations so that people realize, just like there are many ways to go from New York to Los Angeles, or shall I say Melbourne to Sydney, the destination is more important than the journey you take. Parts therapy is one journey of helping a client resolve inner conflicts. Ego state therapy is another journey you can take to reach the destination of helping your client resolve inner conflicts. Another variation that was common in the 1980s and 1990s in America was called voice dialogue. I don't hear very much about it nowadays, but it was very popular in the 80s and 90s, at least in the Pacific Northwest, and I believe all across the country. Somebody posted a comment, do we get a copy of the handout Roy is referring to? So I'm assuming you're taking care of that in the comments section?
Yes, I just wrote out, sign up to the newsletter. I will send it out that way. That's the easiest way I have, because it's impossible to individually. I'm trying
Voice
to do
dialogue was founded by or pioneered by Hal Stone and Sidra Stone, and it's my understanding that they were a married couple creating voice dialogue, and I learned of this, what I'm going to share right now, from somebody who knew them personally. Apparently, they came across the concept of voice dialogue as a way of helping them to resolve their own problems. And then it grew from there and they shared it. So they did not plagiarize ego state therapy from Watkins and Watkins, nor did they plagiarize parts therapy from Charles Tebbets. And I might add at this point, for the history of it, Charlie asked me to continue his work with parts therapy and his entire hypnotherapy training course prior to his passing. And out of all the thousands of students he trained, I felt it was an honor that he asked me. And in fact, I said no at first. I said, Charlie, I've only been in the profession 4 years. I'm not qualified to teach. He said, Hunter, I know a good teacher when I see one. So I said, okay, but I need time to think about it. He said, well, you don't have to say yes now. But he said, just promise me you will give it serious consideration and let me know within a month. So I did something that I never thought I would do. I asked God for a sign. And I told God what sign I wanted, that if I was supposed to teach Charlie's course, that I would teach it in a college. And to the best of my knowledge, no one in the hypnotherapy profession was teaching hypnosis in any college anywhere in the United States in 1987. So I was teaching in the adult education classes, self-hypnosis workshops for self-improvement at evening classes on the college, because they had different people come in to do things for the community. And then I told God, okay.
Oh, sorry, Roy. Sorry, Roy. We just muted you there accidentally. There's a scratching in the background. I'll just be aware of someone's writing, I think, which is great. So just going back to what you were saying.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, what's the last thing you heard? Because I wasn't watching the mute button.
In the College of the Hypnotherapy, you asked for a sign from God about Charles teaching, and you were in the college, and
I was teaching self-hypnosis classes, just 1 or 2 night classes to help people learn self-hypnosis, to manage stress, quit smoking. And my idea was to approach the department chair about the concept of teaching a full hypnotherapy certification course there, which was 9 months long, because you can't learn hypnotherapy in 1 week. In spite of what these good marketers who are better at marketing than they are at hypnotherapy say. We've had way too many short, inadequate training programs in the USA that have hurt our credibility. And I was impressed the first time I taught in the UK in the 90s to find out that the United Kingdom was already at least a decade ahead of the United States in terms of credibility for our profession. But getting back to my college story, I thought that I had little to no chance of selling them on the idea. And then I chickened out of even asking. And the following night, the following Tuesday night, I was going to give my last of a 3-night class on learning self-hypnosis for managing your weight and controlling your eating habits. And before the class, the department chair said, can I buy you dinner before your class? I'd like to run an idea by you. I said, sure. She asked me if I would ever consider teaching a full hypnotherapy certification course. So there was my answer. So I had to say yes to Charlie. And up until she asked me if I would consider teaching, I was going to say no. I didn't believe that I was meant to teach in this life. Boy, was I wrong. So that ended up being a life-changing prayer that was answered in a way I didn't expect.
Yes. Wow.
So
incredible.
Up until after the turn of the century, I taught my full course, which was an updated version of what Charlie taught in a community college. And it gave a lot of credibility to our profession in Washington State. Unfortunately, when I tried to get the major hypnosis associations to do likewise, they declined because I made a lot more money off of the short 1 week and then eventually 2-week training courses. Fortunately, there were a few hypnosis organizations such as the American Council of Hypnotist Examiners and the International Medical Dental Hypnotherapy Association who preferred more credible training courses. So I'm now affiliated with the IMDHA and also the Association of Professional Hypnosis and Psychotherapy, which was founded by Terence Watts at the end of the 20th century in the United Kingdom. And Terence also made me a life diplomat of the APHP, which I'm very honored and grateful for.
Amazing, yeah.
Okay, so I had Charlie's full endorsement. And the reason I took a few minutes to mention that is because I've actually been approached twice by people who don't know the history of parts therapy, and they accused me of stealing somebody else's work. So I just need to go on record saying that Charles Tebbets was a pioneer of parts therapy, and he officially asked me to continue his work prior to his passing. And the best way to prove that is Joyce Tebbets, his widow, wrote the preface to The Art of Hypnotherapy, which is my hypnotherapy textbook based on Charlie's teachings. Lynette, I think or one of you was holding up something you wanted us to see. Were you trying to get me to see it, or was that for Philipa? Okay, I got off track. Let me get back to, I'll get back to voice dialogue. Hal and Sidra Stone, my concern about voice dialogue was that they did it without using trance, and I'm analytical. I tried to be client, not once, but twice, of voice dialogue. And the first time, my analytical resistor part basically wasted my time and the time of the person who facilitated it for me. But then I saw him one more time and said, use hypnosis. Well, he only put me into a light state. I find that not only me, but other analytical resistors like me who have an analytical resistor part need a deeper state in order for parts therapy to be effective. So my critique of voice dialogue is twofold. One, they don't use a deep enough trance, but that only applies to a few of us. So there have been people who've made profound life-changing breakthroughs being on the receiving end of voice dialogue. Secondly, the facilitator of voice dialogue follows what the Stones taught them, and that's to look for specific parts, like calling out a protector part, calling out a resource part. If I call out a protector part for one of my clients, well, the subconscious will comply. But if I get too many parts out all at once, then I have what I call a parts party. It's a confusing mess for both for the facilitator and the client. It's more acceptable for someone who does long-term therapy. Like I'm sure all of you involved in resource therapy know about Emerson's ego state mapping that I learned about years ago.
Yeah, we now call it resource state mapping, and because of the shift. And
that's easy to guess,
isn't it? And it is a great way. And I just want to distinguish, because, you know, hypnosis is a beautiful, wonderful thing. But in resource therapy, we understand that the client is likely in trance, but we don't necessarily have to do a formal induction in resource therapy. In fact, our training is quite separate to that. But yeah. So, but it's a great skill to have. So.
Oh, hello, Anna.
There's
God
Anna
bless
saying
you.
hello. Yeah.
Practice long and prosper.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So there's a lot of training online. I put up the websites for the training too. Sorry, Roy. So you're saying about voice dialogue and the mapping and a parts party. If you also, like resource therapy, name the parts too, or have the client name.
I have the part name itself.
Yes, exactly.
Because sometimes that can be very, very revealing. And occasionally a part other than the one I ask for will emerge. On occasion, I'll ask for the part causing the presenting problem to emerge, but instead the part that wants to overcome the problem emerges first. Or the part that causes a problem talks first, and then when I call out the part that wants to overcome the problem, which I shop talk, I call it the motivating part, I'll find an ally of the conflicting part, or the part causing the problem emerges instead. So that's a good reason why I asked the part to give me its name and job.
Name and
I
job.
don't want to go through the full how-to, because that takes quite a few hours.
9 months.
2 days to do a complete job with practice, etc.
Yeah. Yes, our training is 2 days just for that little introduction. Exactly. But it is worth naming the parts, and that is very revealing, isn't it?
It is. The Stones label the ego parts as selves or subpersonalities. Inner child work was very popular in the States in the 80s and 90s. John Bradshaw went around doing group regression workshops, but he also was a fan of the work of Hal and Sidra Stone. He considers the selves to be developmental stages that remain intact, as discussed on page 217 of his book, The Family, A Revolutionary Way of Self-Discovery. It's now out of print, but it was originally printed by Health Communications. And on 217, he says, quote, hypnotic age regression work clearly suggests that each of these developmental stages remains intact. There are an infant, a toddler, a preschool, a school-aged child in each of us who feel and experience just as we did when we were children. There is an adolescent in us who feels and thinks just like we did in adolescence. What I find interesting in that is it also helps answer the question of how do we get these parts? We get them as we walk through the timeline of life. I used to believe, and even taught my students erroneously, that we have all the parts we want when we mature. I had to eat my words after my first grandchild was born, because my newest part is an inner grandpa.
Yeah, I've found that more and more parts are emerging. Like I've had clients go calm. And that's just a part that's emerged from me, is sort of as what we call in resource therapy, the find resource action, that really is not it's a new part for a person. It's interesting, isn't
To
it?
me, one of my most amazing insights about parts was courtesy of Gordon Emerson when I met him in Melbourne in 2007. He talked about submerged states.
Mm.
And I was absolutely amazed to realize that we have emerged states that we're not even aware of, because I can become aware of my parts by simply meditating, going into self-hypnosis. I do not myself attempt parts therapy on me because it's important to be objective and not emotionally attached to the outcome. So until Bruce Eimer and I became friends, I used to teach against attempting self-hypnosis to do your own parts therapy. However, Bruce is able to be objective and is able to do his own parts therapy on himself in a state of self-hypnosis. So I had to eat those words. So the longer I'm in this profession, the more I realize there is to learn. And something that works for somebody might not work for the next person.
I love that you call your parts therapy and as client-centered, and that's a true aspect of your work, Roy, and that is evidence in what you've just said. They're telling us, you know, there's so much to learn, and what you thought couldn't be is absolutely possible. I do wonder if being a clinical psychologist might help being that objective.
Perhaps. Bruce has years of experience in psychology, and now he's retired from having been a pain psychologist at a major hospital in the Philadelphia area. He moved to Florida, where he now has a full-time psychology and hypnotherapy practice.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I bet you those books are really worthwhile, because a lot of people are struggling with chronic pain. And yeah.
I'm one of them. I got permanent back injury in 1981. That was one of my motivations for going into hypnotherapy, because I was told I'd be on daily pain meds the rest of my life, never be able to lift 25 pounds, and would be partially disabled. And through self-hypnosis, I've been able to tame the chronic pain to a tolerable level. Wow. And I've had decades of practice on that.
Mm-hmm. So you're living proof of that. And isn't that how you got into hypnotherapy, was through that injury?
Yes. I didn't even share that with my students for years. The first time I shared it, one of the students raised a hand and piped up, and she said, "Well, you're walking your talk."
Exactly.
I think I was speechless for a couple seconds, and then all I could do was look at her and say, "Thank you."
Yeah. Yes.
It's as a word of caution, it's off topic, but on topic to hypnotherapy. If any of you ever do pain management for a client or patient, don't totally mask the pain, because pain is a warning something's wrong with the body, and the cause of the pain needs to be diagnosed first. If I were to totally mask my back pain, hypnosis isn't going to grow back a disintegrated disc, and I could cause further injury to my back.
So you're right in sort of saying that there needs to be some level of a sensation there that Correct. You can monitor and know when that level reaches a level that needs to seek further treatment.
I live with pain every day. I'm able to keep it down to a 3 or a 4, sometimes a 1 or a 2. And right now, while I'm talking to all of you, amazingly, it's at a 0. But that's far better to have it average around 3 or 4 than to be a 6 or 7 every day.
True. And I'm wondering, as you're talking to us and it's a 0, what part of you got out talking to us right now? Does this part?
That part of me, which is my hypnotherapy instructor, because to me, hypnotherapy is not just a career, it's a passion, it's my life path. And even though my wife is totally disabled, she understands that I will keep my foot in this profession and help people as long as I am able to do so.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, you've helped so many people and continue to do so even on today's call. Because were you perhaps even a little bit called beyond that? I'm going to just mention a little animal that you may be able to talk to about, and it sort of may relate, is that the scorpion has a sting in its tail.
Well, my back wasn't pointed pain like a scorpion sting, because I was in so much pain from a scorpion sting as a child that I literally had an out-of-body experience. I won't go into that here, but that was actually, I wrote about that.
I read
in,
about that.
The Art of Hypnotic Regression Therapy that Bruce Eimer and I co-authored, because I had two conflicting regressions back to the same event. So I know from experience what it's like to be on the receiving end of a mishandled regression. So if you want to read about that event, it's in a chapter on false memories in the regression text.
Well worth reading. That's where I came with this. Sorry, yeah, Scorpion, I put you on the spot there saying that story. But it is
well,
interesting.
You got me off track, and it immediately triggered some memories.
That part came out probably, how old was that little part? Because that was an intense time, imagine.
That was my inner child, Skipper, that experienced the sting.
Oh, thank you, Skipper. We'll just have the hypnotherapy instructor back on deck now. I use the metaphor of a boat.
But I will tell you, if you don't mind another digression, I will tell you one of my motivations for being so passionate about parts therapy was that I suffered migraine headaches from age 6 all the way through adulthood.
Oh, gosh.
I thought it was just because of being stressed. I didn't know whether there was a medical reason or not. All I knew is that I would get several obnoxious headaches a week that were annoying, but 2 or 3 migraines a month, some of which would put me out of condition, not just for an hour or two, but for a day. And this went on all the way through my 20s, my 30s, up into turning 40. And then when I saw Charles Tebbets do parts therapy on a fellow student for migraines, I was amazed, enthused, and I had to experience it for myself. So I swapped sessions with a fellow student, and the part causing the headaches called himself the judge.
Ah, the judge.
And my inner adult, of course being Roy, wanted to get rid of the migraines. And the judge's job was to make me become perfect as a Father in heaven is perfect, because of authority imprint. My mother said no job is worth doing unless you do it right. And you need to become perfect as a Father in heaven is perfect. So the other psychodynamic was self-punishment. Self-punishment and guilt kind of are the same psychodynamic, but the judge would punish me with a headache whenever I wasn't perfect. So if I got 98 on a final exam at the end of a term, even though it was a solid A, I would go home with a headache. I didn't have a clue consciously why this was happening. I blamed it on the stress of studying for the exam.
As you would.
And then my inner adult, the Roy part of me, said to the judge, the only person who was perfect got nailed for it 2,000 years ago. And the lady I swapped sessions with was a devout Christian, and I still remember her breaking out in total laughter at that comment.
So I am in everyone.
She couldn't resist laughing because, I didn't plan on saying that. But, when I get deep enough in hypnosis to somnambulism, then I can have a successful session. If I'm only in a light state, I'm wasting my time and the time of the person who's trading sessions with me or whom I'm paying to see. But in this case, my inner adult convinced the judge that if I was my best, that should be good enough, because some days my best would be better than other days based on how I feel physically or emotionally or what's going on at home or in my surroundings. The judge agreed to it, and the judge agreed to help me be my best. So what Emerson would have called a evaded part, which was a very negative part that bothered me from age 6 until after I got certified in my 40s, became a very positive part, because the judge judges my books and motivates me to go back and do my best to clean out the grammatical errors, any misspellings, and make sure things are clearly explained because I want them to be better than good before they go to my publisher.
Well,
And apparently the judge has done a good job these last 3.5+ decades.
they're in an amazing job, actually. The judge is actually probably what we call more a retro state, and underneath there would be a little what we call vaded state. And I'm hearing, you know, those are the messages that we get from a parent, an interject that we would call in resource therapy. And we have exactly those, an empowerment protocol. I love that the judge, exactly what we do in resource therapy, is an inner conflict sort of mediation as well.
Well, I considered the judge a very negative part when he first said he was punishing me with headaches for not being perfect. My one of my parts, I think it was my inner skipper part, wanted the judge to be sent out immediately. But thank God the lady did the right job and didn't try to get rid of the judge.
Yes, well, it's a good part, and especially just repurposing its role in a way that all the other parts, and we think this too, and I'm sure you in your parts therapy too, you can't get rid of parts. They're not going to go anywhere because they're actually physically neuronal connections and dendritic synaptic.
I think they would become submerged parts or submerged states if you tried to get rid of them.
And it might
they wouldn't
even
really go away.
Yeah. Sorry, and it might even be like Watkins, where goes the ouch?
Okay, let me cover more on the handout, and then I know you and I had some questions that we agreed that you would ask me. Okay, Satir's parts party and parts integration. Virginia Satir had a variation of parts when she was alive, and Bandler and Grinder talked about parts integration, and apparently Bandler actually met Satir personally. And now the NLP technique is the 6-step reframe, which is really a grandchild of Satir's parts party. Subpersonalities. John Rowan presents his concept of subpersonalities in the very first paragraph of his book, Discover Your Subpersonalities, published in 1993 by Routledge. He says, quote, "Are we just one person, just one self, or do we have several little people inside us all wanting different things? Why should we take it for granted that we have just one personality? Would it not make more sense to say that we are many? Maybe we have more than one sinner within ourselves." Very interesting opening paragraph of his book.
Yes.
And he goes on to suppose our minds are naturally divided into portions and phases with earlier and later historical levels. So I jokingly, my wife and I are Star Trekkies. So I have occasionally jokingly said, well, maybe I ought to consider calling it phase therapy. Phasers in Star Trek, but that just wouldn't make sense. So, but I like the fact that he also Rowan validates what Bradshaw stated, that we develop these various subpersonalities or parts as we go through the timeline of life.
Yes, that's fantastic.
Then when I thought I knew all of the major variations, there are other minor variations, but when I thought I knew all of the major variations, I got an email from Crown House Publishing asking me if I would do a pre-publication review of a book entitled Subliminal Therapy by Edwin Yeager, PhD. He was a professor in the psychiatry department in the University of San Diego. And unbeknownst to me until I read his book, he pioneered a form of parts therapy over 4 decades ago where he would call out only one part. The part that had the client's best wisdom, knowledge, understanding, training, and experience, he would call that part centrum. And instead of mediating between the two parts or among the various parts, if it's necessary to have more than 2 parts, Dr. Yeager would only talk directly with centrum. He would have centrum arbitrate with the other parts. Centrum would tell the other parts what to do. And he documented some amazing cures. For example, I overcame asthma in my 40s, courtesy of having one of my former hypnotherapy students do parts therapy on me to find out what part caused the asthma in the first place. There was an unresolved current issue, which once that issue was resolved, the asthma went away.
Wow.
And I haven't had to take an inhaler in 2.5 decades,
Wow.
over 2.5 decades now. But my doctor at the time said, excuse me, you don't overcome asthma. When you have onset in the middle, in your middle age or after 40, he said, it's a life sentence. I looked him straight in the eye and I said, cancel. What do you mean cancel? You can't cancel medical science. I said, I refuse to accept asthma for the rest of my life. Well,
that was almost like a command, wasn't it? From him?
Yes, and I did not want that going into my subconscious because authority impact is one of the gateways to the subconscious.
Right.
So I decided I was going to cancel that before it took root in my subconscious. I'm glad I did. And I was very pleased to see that Dr. Yeager had many cures of patients who suffered from asthma, and they were documented. His book is a real thick read. It's a hardbound from Crown House Publishing, but I frankly had to put in my review that his work is brilliant. And then it wasn't until after I got really excited about writing The Art of Spiritual Hypnosis, which is an anthology. Over 24 highly respected hypnotherapy trainers and authors from around the globe have contributed some amazing case stories in here. I consider my protocol for spiritual hypnosis not to be the only method, but I use a variation of parts therapy where I only call out one part, and that's the part of the client that's most closely connected to his or her perception of God, higher power, Yahweh, Christ, Holy Spirit, higher self, etc. Well, when I got the opportunity to have lunch with Dr. Yeager, he told me that many of his patients through the years have told him that they believe that Centrum was Holy Spirit or Christ or Yahweh or higher self or Michael the Archangel. So in a sense, Dr. Edwin Yeager was pioneering spiritual hypnosis probably before anyone else in the profession today. And I was amazed and pleased that he shared that with me, but he also added that he couldn't put that in his textbook because the scientific community wasn't ready to accept that yet. But there is something I can share with you that literally made me cry tears of joy when I read it. You'll wonder why I said cry tears of joy, because at the start of the email, he told me that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's when he turned 90. But he had one of his former subliminal therapy students, a psychologist from Germany, become his therapist, and he became the client of his own technique. The results surpassed his expectations. He saw his doctor sometime afterwards. The symptoms were completely gone. He reversed Alzheimer's through subliminal therapy. And this leads me to believe that it's possible for any variation of parts therapy if you access that part or resource or state of the client that is most closely connected to his or her perception of God or higher power. Who knows what miracles of the mind are possible? Included in Ed's email was a PDF of an article that he and the psychologist co-authored and sent to several peer-reviewed medical journals, because it was, I believe, the first medically documented cure of Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And that leads me to believe that there are some amazing possibilities if some of you listening to this want to work with a medical doctor to do some credible evidence-based research, can it make a difference? It might not help people in the latter stages, but if in the early stages, somebody could get on the receiving end of the spiritual application of resource therapy or parts therapy or any of the variations, who knows what the possibilities are? Is it possible that parts therapy, resource therapy, etc., could change the whole paradigm of health care before the end of this century if people realized that you can access the person's divine wisdom if he or she believes in God or a higher power?
Mm.
And the client's my employer, and I do not have a right to put my religious or spiritual beliefs into the subconscious of a client. But I was amazed once when a smoker came, and 5 minutes into the intake, he said, whatever you do, don't bring anything religious or spiritual into these sessions because I'm an atheist. I'm proud of it. Well, I work within the framework of the client's belief system. He comes in for his third session. The second session for smokers I devote to teaching self-hypnosis for stress management, because when I took 5 years surveying my long-term success rate, I found that over half of the people who backslid did so during moments of stress. So I won't even accept a smoker for smoking cessation unless he or she is willing to spend at least one session learning self-hypnosis to manage stress. Well, he comes back for his third session and says, I loved all the suggestions you gave me that first week. And he said, and I'm doing well managing stress. He said, but there's a part of me that keeps resisting some of the best suggestions on quitting smoking, and I don't know why. Well, he was a good candidate, obviously, for parts therapy because he was aware of his inner conflict. The part of him that wanted to keep on smoking refused to negotiate or allow me to mediate with his part that wanted to quit. So, as I do, if there's an impasse, I call out a third part. So I said, whatever part of you can provide some words of wisdom to help us get past this impasse, you're an important part of, and I mentioned the client's name. So when the part emerged, what name or title shall I call you? You can call me Higher Self. Higher Self told the other two parts what to do. Within 5 minutes, they reached terms of agreement. He quit smoking, and the first words go into the subconscious when a person first emerges from hypnosis. So I like my first words to be positive. And after a successful parts therapy, the first thing I usually say is, isn't this amazing stuff? He said, amazing isn't the half of it. I said, what do you mean? He said, higher self was a spiritual part. If I have a spiritual part, that must mean there's a spiritual realm, and logic would dictate there must be some sort of God or higher power. So since it came from his mind, not mine, this atheist comes to me for smoking cessation and 3 sessions later leaves my office believing in God. So I put his case summary as one of my contributions to the book on spiritual hypnosis.
Well, thank goodness for that, because I read a little bit of that in the Inner Conflict resolution book. I think a little hint of that, but it'd be great to get the full one. That was an
I brought it out of the closet. I was afraid to even teach spiritual hypnosis in the college classroom because the strength of my course was that it was secular. Mm-hmm. And my graduates could put their certificate, hypnotherapist certificate, on their wall with pride because it was on a college certificate, also signed by my department chair. But I didn't want to bring any woo-woo stuff into the college classroom, but eventually a friend of mine who was a clinical psychologist, Pam Winkler, and her husband, well, he's on the other side now, Art Winkler. I was having lunch with them, and Pam said, Roy, you need to bring this out of the closet. And she said, you need to write a book on spiritual hypnosis someday. And I said, Pam, I don't even teach it in my classroom. She said, bring it out of the closet. So in 1999, I brought it out of the closet for the first time when I was teaching a parts therapy workshop in Dublin, Ireland. And there were over 40 people in the room, 100% enthusiasm. So that's the first time I brought it out of the closet, and I spend a couple hours every time I teach a parts therapy workshop of 2 days. And I believe that it's an honor and a privilege witnessing and facilitating so many life-changing breakthroughs for people when divine wisdom is accessed.
Isn't that the story too, where in Dublin, the rose came
The what?
from? The rose?
Yes, it is. You read my book. Congratulations. Good on you. Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you. Good on you.
Well, I am so happy that Margaret was willing to let me share her story with her real name in the parts therapy text. She was a real inspiration to me. And when she came up and handed me that full red rose after sharing her own success with everybody, I had to fight to hold the tears back. So I probably wiped a couple tears from my eyes after I let everyone take a 15-minute coffee break.
Yeah, because that was apparently, wasn't it, a connection that she reconnected with in a healing.
There are other variations of parts therapy also, and unfortunately some of them are people who read my book but didn't want to learn my methods and do it exactly like me, so they changed something, put their own spin on it. Some of them call it parts therapy, some of them call it by a different name, and I hope that Gordon doesn't have the same problem with resource therapy.
We hope so too, but we're honouring in resource therapy. I'm Vice President of Resource Therapy International. Gordon's President of Resource Therapy International, and of course we have Anna Emerson, the Secretary of Resource Therapy International, here on the call with us. Say hi, Anna. Just unmute yourself and just say a quick wave too, because you know we do. Gordon's like you, very generous in his time and giving parts. Obviously, we encourage people to go and learn from our official bodies, go to Roy's website and so forth to follow. I think it makes sense to follow the masters and people who've learned. You can adapt, sure, but credit where credit's due is so important.
Thank you. Speaking of credits due, there's references on page 4 of the handout, academic references. And also, if I can digress for just a moment.
Oh yeah, love your digressions.
Anna is on the call. My wife said, if Anna Emerson comes online, please say hello to her for me. So my wife says hello, Anna. She remembers you and Gordon with lots of love.
Actually, Anna's saying, hang on, I'll just find her on the call. I'll just ask to unmute. She's, I don't know, something. I can't, I'm asking to unmute. Can you see that, Anna? Ah, yeah.
Great. Yes, I was trying to unmute, but it wouldn't let me. Thank you. Hi, Roy.
Hi, Anna. It's so nice to see your face and hear your voice.
Lovely to see you too. And hello to your wife as well. Much love to both of you.
I will give her your message verbatim when the presentation's over.
Missing you guys. Still thinking of your that wonderful day we spent together, remember? When we went to...
How could I forget? That was a glorious day.
It really was. Really,
and I still remember some of the stories, the case stories that Gordon shared with me on our way back.
Yeah, and stories that you shared as well. Amazing. Yeah.
Well, give him our best. Tell him that
will.
the hunters send their fondest wishes.
I absolutely
and practice
will.
long and prosper.
Verbatim, and don't do that because I can't do it.
The effort is accepted. Good on you for trying.
That is a hard thing to do, isn't it? And yes, I got to thank Anna and Gordon too for introducing me really to Roy. I reached out to Roy because of Anna and Gordon, and I'm all about getting great stuff out there. Resource therapy obviously is the primal, but parts therapy is a fabulous modality as well. And so digressing a little bit more, Roy, I wonder, thank you, Anna, too. Beautiful to see you again. And of course, there's lots of training online too. And I put up some on the chats and I'll send that out in the newsletters as well. I'll be having an intergenerational bridging seminar to deal with processing trauma. So if you sign up to get the replay, if you want this replay, sign up to the Resource Therapy Institute newsletter. That's the easiest way, RTIA, that's resourcetherapy.com.au, for me to get it out there. So Roy, I wonder if we wouldn't go to some of the questions in the chat, if you've got time.
You must have been reading my mind. I was just going to suggest that you said you wanted to ask me some questions, so I'm ready.
Well, actually, even though then I'd prefer to go to the questions we've got that's come up through your beautiful presentation, amazingly. So there were some questions around migraines. Who was saying that? Was that you, Faye? Faye, and I'll get you to unmute yourself, Faye, so you can ask perhaps Roy those questions. Faye from New Zealand, you there? Where are you, Faye? Can I see you? Oh, there you are. Hi, Faye.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, hi, good morning. Roy, fascinating. I'm totally fascinated. And I was really intrigued when you were talking about your journey with recovery from migraine and how, if I understood correctly, it was the judging part that was doing the migraine behavior, was doing it because of a need for perfectionism. Did I understand that correctly?
For perfectionism, yes.
Right.
The judge punished me when I did something important that wasn't perfect. So I got
Right.
punished for not being a perfect husband. I got punished for not being a perfect father. I did my best, but it wasn't good enough as far as the judge was concerned.
And Roy, the reason why this is really fascinating to me is because I have heard previously somewhere in the ether that migraine headaches are related to perfectionist tendencies. And the cases that I've had of clients who come to me with migraines, now I haven't had any success with them, but thinking back, they all have perfectionist tendencies. So is there a direct correlation between perfectionism and migraines?
I don't know is the best answer I can give you,
Okay.
but that certainly was the case with me. They were
Yeah.
directly related to my
Yeah.
migraines. But somebody could do some credible research on that. The person in my classroom who overcame migraines, it had nothing to do with professionalism for him.
Okay.
The part of him that gave him the migraines was called slow down. He wanted him to slow down because he was a workaholic.
Right.
He was so busy being a good hypnotherapy student, a good
Yeah.
law enforcement officer, and
Yeah.
he wanted to learn hypnosis for forensic applications.
Yeah.
But life was all work and no play, so the part of him causing the migraines did it to make him slow down and take some physical rest.
It makes so much sense, eh? It makes so much sense. It feels like this is the missing part in my training and my clinical practice. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm dying to study this now. I'm dying to study it.
Yeah. Stress could also have been related to his situation too, because my guess is he was stressing himself out by being a workaholic.
That's what I was going to say. I think there's a common theme and thread is pressure and emotional self-talk, probably what we would call in resource therapy from learned in early childhood from an interject to be, you know, and a parent trying to encourage, but in a way that the child is taken on with little people. It's like, I've got to do my best. Otherwise, I'm not going to be perhaps loved or appreciated as much.
Yeah.
I know for me, it was life-changing. One session was life-changing because if I had to be concerned about getting a migraine, how would I be able to effectively travel the world and teach parts therapy?
Oh, wow.
I'd have to have a substitute in case I was in the hotel room with a migraine for 4 hours on day 2.
And that would lead to a level of anxiety again, stress, and secondary syndromes start. And I think then the body reacts to that stress.
So all the people who benefited from my teachings in parts therapy can thank the lady who did a wonderful job facilitating my session all those years ago.
Fantastic, isn't it? And thank you, Roy, isn't it? It's a really good idea, I think, as therapists to actually practice what we preach and get some work.
Oh, I've had more opportunities to walk my talk than I care to share. But how can I say I believe in hypnotherapy if I'm not willing to be client when it's necessary? Notice I did not say if, I said when it's necessary.
Yeah. beautiful win. And in the
I
training,
really,
it's so vital too, isn't
I
it?
thank you for the question. I think it's a very important question, and I would like to see somebody do some credible research on the use of parts therapy or resource therapy for migraines.
Well, Gordon did one in early, in I think it's 86, don't quote me on that, in his PhD around migraines and using ego state therapy. But there does need to be some more contemporaneous things, and migraines are a nice discrete thing. I've used resource therapy with great success it's been around assertiveness, being able to not voice oneself. And so for instance, I had a client who the only time she'd get the migraine was interestingly, it wasn't random, it was when she had to go to her mother-in-law's.
Oh, that makes sense. Again, stress triggered it.
Yeah, that's right. And just going to the other questions. If anyone's got any questions, please put them up. Yeah, Natalie, you're the one about the excuse one? Is that the one? No, I just want to come to that one first, and then I come to you, Natalie. Thank you. Someone wrote about a question, and I can't find it. Can you just unmute yourself?
I will finish by saying that was life-changing for me when I had just one session permanently overcoming. And the difference between ages 6 through my early 40s and the last 3.5 decades plus is like night and day.
Wow. That's a powerful testament, isn't it? So I'm just asking, did someone... Natalie's got a good question, but there was one a little bit earlier about something about an excuse. Oh, wait, I'm not sure. Anyway, we'll come to you, Natalie, and if that comes up.
Parts
Natalie,
are filled with excuses for not wanting to change, if that's what the question is about.
I'll ask
and
you
if a part refuses to let me mediate, then I call out a third part. If it's necessary to call out a fourth part, then I will either go for the higher power if the client believes in God or a higher power, or I'll go for a centrum-like part.
Like a mother nature or some sort of being that would fit. Hi, Natalie, I see you're unmuted.
Yes. Hi, Roy. Thank you so much. I'm just wondering that part that you said with your asthma that needed healing. I'm very curious about that because I have a son with chronic asthma, and he's 9 and he has half a year off school every year. And there's something going on. I know it's emotional because I've done everything, you know, as far as gluten-free, dairy-free, sulfate, you know, like just, and when you said that, I thought that is for me. I needed to hear about that, if that's okay.
You hit on a very important key there. The part of me that caused the asthma was very angry at a family member who hurt me very deeply. And then I wrote a letter to that family member's higher self or soul, vented my feelings. I used some unchristian, unprofessional words in that letter. And then at the end of the letter, signed it, God, take these feelings from me and transform them as I transform this letter. I printed it, signed it, dated it, prayed over it, and burned it.
Yeah.
And that following, you know, that was only a few days after being on the receiving end of the parts therapy session where I was aware of the cause of the asthma. I wanted parts therapy to get at the cause of the asthma. I did not realize I would be able to overcome it so quickly. Wow. But it was very important for me to deal with that issue. And then basically, I will never condone what that person did, but the person is totally forgiven.
Yeah, you're no longer carrying the burden. Although for a young person, I'm wondering, I'm jumping in here, Natalie and Roy. I mean, so obviously there could be some part, it could be, in my experience, when we do bridging and resource therapy, it can be around the birth, where someone's been born with the blue, what they call a blue birth, you know, with the cord around their neck. Sometimes, or, you know, or even in utero. The other thing, there might be some anger. I was thinking you could almost do some drawing around that to get the different parts and work with the parts like that, and especially if, you know, rather than writing, but drawing for a little person and how they, and how that part might be trying to help as well.
I was just thinking also as an add-on to your question, two add-ons. One, everybody I have known personally who had asthma was very emotional. And number two, Ed Yeager documented many cures of asthma as a result of subliminal therapy.
There we go. So if we talk to the right part and help process it and give it an expression, which we do in resource therapy, and that's what I'm hearing that happened, you were able to express what you needed to. And we have a metaphor for letting go, which you probably, you know, the separation sieve, which also is a process for separating the heavy negative feelings and from the person, which is quite a powerful process in a resource therapy training. I'm sure there's many sort of similar things in hypnosis.
I just saw that question about alcoholism, and I have had very limited experience, but I'll share two case summaries. One good, one not so good. The good one is a man saw me and he wanted parts therapy. He knew a little bit about it to help him reduce the frequency and quantity of his drinking because he didn't want it to affect his family or his job or his finances. He was successful. Parts therapy helped him control his alcohol. He was not chemically addicted to it. It was a behavioral thing. If someone is chemically addicted, once they pass that lifetime tolerance, they need a certified substance abuse counselor. You can work in conjunction with a certified substance abuse counselor, but unless you yourself have training in how to deal with alcoholics, it's important to understand that a true alcoholic is very prone to lying. And I have difficulty spotting the lies because I take a client at his or her word. So my other case was a man who came in and said, I'm drinking 2 or 3 cases of beer every day, and I really need to deal with this because I don't want to get pulled over for driving under the influence. And his wife came with him on the intake. She wanted to make sure that he was going to get proper help. So I started out by teaching him self-hypnosis to manage stress so that he wouldn't immediately go for the alcohol if someone pushed his stress buttons. And then I did parts therapy. I won't go into the details, but let's just say the parts agreed that he would use either water or orange juice instead of beer. And I thought, you know, job done. He came in, he told me he was happy, he was satisfied. And, you know, I was happy to accept his fee of several $100s for the sessions he had with me. 9 months later, his wife came in and wanted hypnosis for weight management. And then she said, can I ask you some questions about your work with my husband? I said, you can ask me any question you want about the first session since you sat in on it, but I can't say anything about the subsequent sessions. Just as I can't say anything to your husband about your sessions. So after explaining client confidentiality and the fact that it's a state law, also, I think it's a law in every state in America, probably in Australia also, and it's in the code of ethics of every credible hypnotherapy association. She said, well, I bet my husband told you that he was drinking orange juice instead of beer. I didn't say anything in response, no comment. She said, I bet he didn't tell you he was putting vodka in the orange juice. That was the first time I knew I'd been had. She said, I bet he also didn't tell you that he already was arrested for driving under the influence and court ordered by a judge to get professional help, but he wanted to spend $400 for hypnotherapy instead of $4,000 to go to a rehab center. So he only saw you to save over $3,000.
There's a
I think she could tell by my facial expression that he hadn't shared any of that with me.
And
So
there's a
I have shared
complexity,
that
isn't there?
story with a lot of my participants in parts therapy workshops.
I
I
think
can only help someone who chooses to change.
exactly. They might be, especially in having worked in drug and alcohol myself for many years. And kept them
You
out
can
of-
relate to the fact that they lie, then, can't you?
Well, there's this what's called the Prochaska di Clementi stages of change model, and pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, and relapse are all part of that. This guy is really not in the action phase, which our clients will be. We can help try and get apart. I'm also thinking when you're dealing with addictions, whatever they are, there's a high level of toxic shame. So that's where these unwanted behaviors, which we call usually retro states in resource therapy parts terminology, they will prevent the person from feeling whatever emotion and drive behaviors. And they're usually related, especially in those sort of chemical addictions, to early childhood trauma, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So you're not just dealing with an alcohol abuse or in this case dependence scenario, but you're actually dealing with a long history of learned behavior, of coping mechanism from early childhood. So that needs to be addressed. Regression work would be necessary in dealing with what we call the vaded state, which holds that unwanted emotion first. And then we deal with the part that's performing the addictive type behavior, which we call a retro state. So in resource therapy, there's a two-part process.
So can I safely assume that if anyone listening to this in the resource therapy organization has a question or a concern about dealing with an alcoholic, that they can get some tips from you, Philipa?
Well, it comes in the training. Yes, thank you, Roy. Yeah.
If a client sees me for alcoholism, ever since that situation happened, I won't work with him or her unless they are also working in conjunction with a certified chemical dependency counselor, and then gives me written permission in writing to collaborate with the CDC.
I think that's a
because
really
I'm
important
not
point.
trained in the alcohol area, and I strongly believe we should not go beyond our area of expertise. I've held that position all my years in practice.
It's a wonderful position to hold. And I think people who have addictions are likely to have complex issues, and there does need to be sort of a team approach. And I love that you're working and collaborating. I'm a systemic therapist by trade. And so possibly I'm going to your question, Tully, here, parts therapy in conjunction with Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, that's up to the person. Alcoholics Anonymous is a 12-step recovery group. I think there's an important aspect to social support around that. But then also some groups can become very prescriptive. So it's up to that person, Tully. But what I'm going to suggest is that social support as well, not just an hour of therapy or 90 minutes
Correct.
of therapy.
Yes.
They're going to need a whole lot of support in their community, in their relationships, health-wise, because, yeah, this is usually early stuff,
I would concur with that.
Yeah. Whatever works for the person too, for whatever
And
works.
speaking of addiction, one of my only failures in parts therapy was a person who came to me to overcome a gambling addiction. He said his wife was going to divorce him if he didn't overcome his gambling addiction. Well, I failed to do a thorough intake because I can only help a person who chooses to change. A part of him didn't want to change, and his gambling was more important than his wife. So he called, I followed up on him several months later, and he said he loved gambling too much, couldn't give it up, and his wife separated from him. I
wonder, Roy, just thinking about the parts, sorry if I'm interrupting that story, but sometimes parts don't know other parts very well. And, you know, especially like that part, gambling part would just kind of, it's like what we call, you know, like the white knight comes in to save the day. So its needs would trump every other part's needs almost. You know?
I endeavor to do a good enough intake to determine whether the client really chooses to change or not. And as a side note, Anna Emerson posted a comment all of you need to find in the chat section about resource therapy for alcoholism. At any rate, the lady came in wanting to quit smoking, said, I don't know if I'm a good candidate for hypnosis because I have a strong rebel button. I don't like being told what to do. And I said, well, I have good news. The rebel button is that part of you that realizes your power of choice is very important and you don't want to give your power of choice to anyone else. So I can teach you how you can make that rebel button become an ally instead of an obstacle by learning how to rebel against a cigarette which says, come here, I am your cigarette god, and I command you to light a match to your money and burn me. She kind of laughed, but then she said, the problem is my husband has been nagging at me for 2 years to quit smoking. And she said, but I really need to quit. And she said, my employer is a lung specialist. She was an RN. And it embarrasses me when a patient smells cigarette smoke in my hair. So I said, well, the bottom line is you have to do this because you choose to. I can't make you do something unless you choose to. And she said, that's just it. My husband and I have been arguing about it so long, I'm so stressed, I don't know whether I want to quit smoking or not. So I said, well, let me ask you a question. It's obvious you don't like being told what to do. You don't like being manipulated. If your husband wasn't pressuring you to quit, would you be a smoker or a non-smoker? She said, I would have quit 2 years ago if it hadn't been for him pressuring me to quit. I said, oh, do you realize you let your husband manipulate you into smoking 2 years longer than you wanted to? She dropped the pen on the clipboard, used a swear word I won't repeat, and said, I never thought of it that way before. She signed the disclosure form, gave me a check for the session, and 4 sessions later, because she had a difficult time and she also was in a high-stress job, I learned years ago that nurses oftentimes undergo a lot of stress, especially if their doctors that they work with are jerks.
Yeah.
And her doctor, well, let's just say they were better doctors than the doctor she worked with. But on the 4th session, she said, I just want you to know that when you ask me that question, before you ever hypnotized me the first time, I knew, and I knew that I knew I would never smoke again, but I just wanted to go through the hypnosis to make my decision easier for me.
Yeah, I thought you could have walked away then. She made that decision. So powerful.
I thanked her for her honesty. That was, you know, if she knew that she was never going to smoke again, she could have walked out without paying, because my intake is a 2-way screening process. If I don't think I'm the right person for them, I'll tell that to the client. And I give the client an opportunity to find out if he or she's going to be comfortable with me as well. That's part of my client-centered platform.
It's a wonderful platform. Thank you for the stories, Roy.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Because I'm yes. Well, we could keep you here all day, but we'll perhaps go another like 15 minutes or so if maximum. Is that okay, Roy? Have you got the time?
I can stay another 15 minutes. Someone asked about tinnitus.
Yes.
If you want a
James.
wealth of information on tinnitus, KevinHogan, that's kevinhogan.com. Okay. He wrote a book on tinnitus. He's a professional speaker. He's a hypnotherapist, although I don't think he's done hypnotherapy in years, but he overcame a horrible case of tinnitus thanks to hypnotherapy. He employs hypnosis, parts therapy, and regression therapy. Somebody posted his website there.
I just put it in
and amazingly, in 37 years of practice, I've only ever had one client see me for tinnitus, and he didn't keep all of the sessions.
Because it is a terrible problem. I've had clients, it's like a chainsaw in their ear, and potentially it could be a part that's causing that. This person actually had an operation that resulted in this terrible tinnitus. A lot of people.
I can tell you that my personal and professional opinion is managing stress can help it, because I'm 77, and if I get stressed and don't walk my talk effectively, I'll get tinnitus. And I turn the volume down by doing self-hypnosis and going to my peaceful place. So stress apparently is one of the causes of tinnitus. I'm not a doctor. I can't give you a medical explanation of what's going on, but I do know that I have had a mild case of tinnitus for quite a few years because of being a senior citizen. However, I am able to manage it by managing stress.
That's the key, isn't it?
Peaceful place meditation is great. In fact, I won an award for the Hypnotic Voice of the Year in 1990, making a 10-minute audio recording of a peaceful place meditation. So it's an award-winning meditation. And if anyone wants that, if you go to royhunter.com for the basic hypnosis products, don't click on the CD, it's $19.95, but I have a free link where you can listen to it online for free.
I will put that out in the newsletter too. Thank you, Roy. That's so generous of you. And
if you want to email me, I can give you the direct link if you want.
Okay, I'll get that from email to get the direct link, send it all to you. Because I don't know about everyone else, I'm sure in this presentation, I'm kind of hypnotized by you, just you're talking.
I have heard that so many times from clients, even clients who've never been hypnotized before. Oh, I think I'm hypnotized just hearing your voice right now. And I'm not intending to do that until I deliberately start, but I take it as a compliment.
It's a very big compliment, and isn't it? The voice is such a powerful instrument for stress relief, and given this world we're in at the moment, it's like super stressed. That would be.
Oh my God, that's why I decided to make the 10-minute nap. That's what it's called. That's why I decided to make the 10-minute nap free.
Oh, thank you for that.
To give to people who visit my website and are tired of dealing with all the worldwide stress, which is worse in 2020 than any year I've been alive.
It is, yes. And someone said in the chat how youthful you are. I think it was Anna saying, we don't believe you're 77. No. And it's obviously you are walking your walk, the stress relief. I would... Because it's interesting, I'll see clients and I'm thinking, oh, they're about my age, and or no, they're about 72, and they'll tell me they're actually my age, and they look about 72. Isn't it amazing how the bodies can wear that? So Robin was the self-hypnosis techniques. What books or would you recommend for your self-hypnosis technique as well as parts therapy? Well, obviously we're promoting here resource therapy and parts therapy. You can learn that. We've got Resource Therapy International, Resource Therapy Institute Australia, where
I could talk a long time on self-hypnosis, but let me just say that someone who works for Crown House Publishing told me that my book, Mastering the Power of Self-Hypnosis, second edition, is the best self-hypnosis book in the marketplace. I was very grateful for that compliment. So I can refer you to that. It's available from Crown House Publishing. And it would be cheaper for you to buy it from Amazon than to buy it from my website if you live in Australia because of international shipping charges. Those of you in the USA, I'd just as soon you buy it off my website if you want it.
Yes. I'm going to just pop up your website there. I have already, but there's books, and I'll just do a little quick screen share as well so that people have that, because it will benefit everyone, and as very much a sign of appreciation here, I'll just screen share the actual website of Roy's so you can have a look at these wonderful titles. Hypnosis books by Roy. There's The Spiritual Art of Hypnosis, and book 2, and there's The Art of Hypnotic Regression, The Art of Hypnosis. Wow, I tell you, the judge has been busy.
Yes, the judge has been very busy.
And you can see all those looking through the glasses, so many. And I've got to say, Roy, your books are so readable. I love the format. There we go. This
Thank
is
you.
the one you were referring to here, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I do believe Crown House, oh, I need to change that to DAPHP.
Yeah, this one here.
I do believe Crown House has that available in Kindle format for some of you who are overseas and don't want to pay overseas shipping charges, but I'm not certain. They have some of my books in electronic format, but not all of them.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's fantastic. I recommend them. Luckily, I had them all, the couple of books that I had, because they would take a little bit longer to get through now. So if you can...
Unfortunately, this is with Blooming Twig Publishing. They will not ship overseas on an order off my website. So anyone outside of the USA would need to order this from Amazon.com.
Okay, good to know, good to know. And yeah, fantastic, because your work is benefiting thousands and maybe more from and I love that we've got such a beautiful dedicated bunch of therapists that are giving up their Saturday evenings where they may be early mornings in the UK and Sunday mornings, and you know what a deeply caring bunch of therapists are there on this call with us, Roy.
I'm impressed, and I consider it an incredible privilege and honor that so many people appreciate my work. The judge has motivated me to give as much as I can to the profession.
And any parting thoughts or any questions that you would say to people? And I'm hoping that we might be able to get you back again. It's been so amazing.
I would be happy to.
Oh, wonderful.
My advice, I guess I could say a couple of things. One, always be willing to learn, because the longer I'm in this profession, the more I realize there is that I don't know. But you don't have to be perfect to help most of the clients most of the time. You just have to know enough to fit the technique to the client instead of trying to fit the client to your technique. The other important thing is what I consider not just a professional ethic, but also a personal ethic and a life ethic, if I can be bold enough to say that. Treat your client the way you would want to be treated if the roles were reversed. And if everyone in the world endeavored to treat their friends, their spouse and loved ones the way they want to be treated if the roles were reversed, we'd have world peace instead of chaos. So imagine how much better would this world be if even the majority of people endeavored to treat others the way they wanted to be treated. And you don't have to be religious or spiritual to believe in the golden rule. It just makes good sense, and it's a win-win for everybody concerned.
That's a beautiful golden rule. Share only, kindness, and yeah, it reminds me also of Watkins. He wrote a book on love, resonance. You know.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize that.
He did.
Thank you. Learn something new every day.
And that was about his love for his wife, I think, and how that presents in therapy. Because you know, there's a gift of, we get so much, I think, as therapists in helping. I get a kick out of it.
Well, sometimes I have literally had to wait until a client left my office before wiping tears of joy from my eyes after being privileged to facilitate a life-changing breakthrough for somebody.
Oh, so amazing. I'm getting tears even hearing that. I have that too. I've shared the tears of joy and relief with clients. It just, it's amazing, isn't it? Yes, it is. Parts therapy, hypnosis, these are these powerful types of therapies that are really profound in the emotional shifts. I notice, I'm aware that I only asked you for another 15 minutes. We've got a couple of questions. I don't want to overdo my welcome here, as we say in New Zealand. But there's a couple more if you're okay, Roy. Are people okay?
I'm okay.
Thank you. There's James, you had a question about picky eaters and your son is underweight. James, you want to just come forth and unmute yourself so we can see you, James, if you're there? James? Have you dealt with anyone around eating, you know, in your many years of practice? I'm sure.
Shall I say thousands of times? Occasionally, I have dealt with children. But there are a lot of people in our profession. Oh, he says can't seem to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Where are you there? Just, can I see you? Michelle. Oh, James, right in front of me. Sorry. There you go. I've seen an ask to unmute. Yep.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I've got a darling 17-year-old, and he's always been a real picky eater, to the extent that, you know, he's always a bit frustrated because he's underweight compared to his buddies. And yeah, you know, if I think about the range of food I eat, I reckon he eats like about, I don't know, 20% of the beautiful food that's out there, if you know what I mean? Yeah, and it does my head in. I don't know, I'm trying to help him, you know, explore food and put a bit of weight on.
I normally don't do parts therapy for children, but on occasion I have attempted parts therapy on a teenager who's in his or her late teens. And if he were my client, I would start out by having him list his benefits for making wise choices. And if those suggestions were rejected, then I would consider using parts therapy to call out that part that's not making wise choices about the eating habits. And if you're trained in resource therapy, I would think that resource therapy would be a good road to travel.
Yeah, we actually do that as work with. I found it fabulous for teenagers, and it is. We do work with parts and resource therapy too, younger children as well. But teenagers love it because it's kind of fun. Parts,
yeah,
and they get it. They just get it. Like I had a young man, and he was saying he's not doing very well in school. This other part said, "Meh, it's not going to matter. You're going to be an entrepreneur." It's not your... So he was able to kind of feel less stress and actually perform better at school. It's funny how these things happen. So maybe, I don't know, there could be, and it also there, I think, Roy, that could be a younger part. There might be something else involved going on there, some sort of...
It's entirely possible. I normally don't offer regression therapy for a teenager, but I did one time. Lady came in, her son was only 16. She knew about regression therapy because she did hypnotic regression for the Church of Scientology. She said they call it auditing rather than hypnosis, but she felt that she might be part of his initial sensitizing event, so she felt it would be better for me to do the regression while she sat outside, because she was afraid that if she was present for the session, that he wouldn't reveal the true core cause.
And was he able to go back to initial sensitizing event? I'm glad you used that terminology.
Yes, he was.
Yep. And what did it relate to her?
And I don't remember now whether the activating event was the same as ISE or whether it happened several years later. Sometimes they're one and the same. Sometimes they're separated by years. On rare occasions, decades.
And that brings me, actually, sorry, James, I hope that gives you some ideas. So the ISE is where we bridge back to, or in this case, we're using regression to that initial sensitizing event. We do this in resource therapy too, working with states faded in fear and rejection, which...
It was actually Gordon Emerson who pointed out to me that regression is a form of parts therapy, because when you do the informed child technique, after I take the client to his or her peaceful place and have him or her relive the event, but with all of the present adult knowledge, understanding, training, and awareness, it's the inner adult assisting the inner child. So that's like a variation of parts therapy.
It certainly is. And it's very powerful, isn't it? Sorry.
Yes, it is. It has to be done properly, and you have to understand the risk of false memories. Well, I don't want to go into that. That's a whole new topic, but I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have been trained in regression.
Or we call it bridging in resource therapy. It's one of the resource therapy actions, resource therapy, and we use it in specific.
Oftentimes a part will go into regression and parts therapy also. So I recommend that anyone learning parts therapy also get trained in regression therapy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I just have
another question.
One more question. It's reminding me with ISE. Marcel, you asked about Roy's probably favorite regression or bridging technique. Marcel, are you on the call still there, Marcel? About the initial sensitizing event. That was my trigger words. And then that'll be the last question before we leave.
The regression technique, which is my technique of choice for probably over half of my clients, if not the majority of them, is affect bridge, because when they get emotional about the presenting problem, you can use that emotion, even if they don't go deep in hypnosis, to guide them right back, usually to the ISE. Sometimes it's activating event, but most of the time it's the initial sensitizing event. So that's my favorite regression technique. And I had a man who was more of an analytic resistor than I am. He saw me years ago. Actually, the state sent him, DSHS, Department of Social Health Services. They gave him permission because he was disabled and receiving money from the state for his disability. He saw me for fear of heights. Mm-hmm. And he was so analytical, he would not, after several deepening attempts, he would not allow himself to get deeper than very light state of hypnosis. And yet, he was so emotional about the fear of heights that he went right back to the initial sensitizing event, which also was the activating event. No, I take that back. It was the same day. The initial sensitizing event happened when some bully pushed him off a ladder at school and then lied, and the teacher punished him for it when he socked the bully in the stomach. He got punished while the bully got off scot-free, and the teacher believed the bully instead of him. So he goes home, and his father punished him because the teacher called his father before he got home. So all that was cleared up in a matter of 15 minutes as a result of the affect bridge. So even though he was not very deep in hypnosis, and I would not have initiated parts therapy at his level because he was 70 on that 100-to-1 deepening scale that I use. He had a successful session, and it was so life-changing for him that several months later he became a hypnotherapy student, and a couple of years later after that gave a presentation at a national hypnosis conference on working with disabled clients. So I would say that was a successful regression.
I think it was a success. You would. I think we would all say that. That's amazing. And life-changing, not only personally, but professionally. Yes. That's amazing, isn't it? Well, thank you, Roy. I'm going to, because you've been so wonderful and generous in your time, call it a time for here so we can let people who've been up awake go back to bed, and you can have your Saturday evening in Seattle and people can have their Sunday. But we really so appreciate you, Roy. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So grateful you're saying.
Oh, you are very welcome. And I thank all of you for staying with me the whole time.
Oh, you have. You've had us entranced. And thank you to everyone on the call. Thank you from Resource Therapy Institute Australia. We really value, because it doesn't happen unless you turn up as well. It's a very important part here. So thank you.
Since we went longer than expected, you might want to put the length on the video so that people know how long the time to allow. They might want to watch the recording in 2 sittings rather than 1.
Absolutely. It's going to be on YouTube as well. It's freely available. I like to be generous as well with Joy. Roy's been really generous. Yeah, because we're here, help us to help more people and putting things out into the universe that help people freely is a wonderful thing, isn't it, Roy? So thank you so much for your time. If anyone wants to stay back and just say a quick hi, you're welcome. Just if you need to go, I just really blessings to you all. Yeah.
Practice long and prosper.
Practice long and prosper. That's so applicable to therapists.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Roy. Yeah, and if people, thanks, Michelle. Thank you, Trina. Thank you to everyone. Yeah. if you want to stay along, Roy, a little bit, I'm going to turn off the recording for now.
Okay.
Stop recording because we've got to